But out of nowhere, she just goes, I feel like you right now are trying to tell me that you think my dad is your dad.
Hello, you are listening to NPE Stories. This is a podcast where NPEs can share their story. I am your host, Lily, and I found out I was an NPE through an ancestry DNA test that changed my life forever. NPE is a term that stands for Not Parent Expected or Non-Paternal Event. This means that one or more of our parents are not who we believe them to be. NPE Stories is a podcast where NPEs can share their story of what their original family was like, how they found out they were an NPE, and what their journey has been like since the day they found out. And welcome to episode 157. And today I am speaking with Josie. Hi, Josie.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you came on today. I saw that when we first started emailing, I think about a year ago, we were talking about, I think, one of the NPE retreats, the High Wraith Hope and Healing retreat. Do you remember that?
Oh, possibly.
Possibly. Did you ever get a chance to make it out to one of those virtually or?
I have not. I have not, and I wish I did. And part of my story, as I'll talk about, is sort of just how I wish I found a lot of these resources sooner rather than later, and had the wherewithal to actually go through with a lot of them.
Yes, same, because it feels so much better when you know you're not alone and other people are experiencing the same things as you.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Okay, I will put a link below for the retreat that I'm referring to. It's called High Wraith Hope and Healing. They put on retreats for NPEs, late discovery adoptees, and donor-conceived individuals a few times a year. And you are welcome to look them up on Facebook or through their website and join one of those. Those are just like 20 or 30 NPEs that get together in a house, and there's facilitators and healing and wonderful food and fellowship. And it's a great place to get together with others going through the same thing as you. But today we are going to listen to your story, Josie. And I think probably a lot has changed since we first started talking.
Yes. So a lot has changed. I will say I originally reached out, in those early days after your initial discovery, when you're just kind of frenzied and frantic and searching wherever you can search, whether that's podcasts, YouTube, Google searches, what have you, for information. At that point, I was pretty much in the beginning of my story. And basically, the story that I'm going to tell today, about 90 to 95% of it all happened in the span of 6 weeks. So for me, everything happened very, very fast, and it was hard for me to kind of process everything. So at this point, there have been some updates. So I kind of actually do have a full-bodied beginning, middle, end-ish kind of story here.
Great. Okay, so start at the beginning and let me know about your family of origin.
Yeah. So my name's Josie. Right now I live in California. I'm settled here with my family. I have a husband and a daughter and a couple dogs. And my background on my childhood is that I was actually born in Florida, but I was raised in Michigan. And my parents, they met, my mom was actually 18 years old and my dad was 36. He was a Marine, always looked much, much younger than his actual age. And I will kind of preface this story that the beginning and sort of majority of my mom and dad's actual marriage occurred in the late 70s, early 80s in Miami, Florida. So if you think about the Miami scene in those days and that era, you might be able to kind of imagine things that were happening and the type of lifestyle that most people back then were living. So just throwing that out there. Yeah. So, and it's funny because like now I can kind of laugh about it, but then I don't know. It's just a testament to how time really can help you heal. So it's probably serendipitous that we're having this conversation now versus super early in my journey. Yeah, I will say so. Yeah, my parents married each other. Obviously, a huge age gap. Very much in love. They left Miami in probably the late 70s for a job that my dad had gotten in Ohio. But they eventually made their way back to another part of Florida, which is where I was born before I permanently relocated to Michigan at that point as a baby with both of my parents married to each other. My parents ended up actually getting divorced probably when I was around 18 months to 2 years old. So I was raised mostly by my mom. She, she really wanted me to have some sort of relationship with my dad, albeit, I'm an only child of a single mom for the most part of my childhood, being raised. So I kind of connected more with my mom than sort of like I don't want to say estranged, but, my father, who at that point had remarried, and he had another son, my half brother. When I was 7, my half brother was born. So that kind of changed the dynamic a little bit. And I kind of, my dad's attention was sort of put towards his new family and sort of helping that grow and thrive. And, it's hard. Anybody who's a child of divorce knows the trials and tribulations. And it was very much that. I always wished I had a sibling, like a full sibling, to kind of commiserate with growing up and kind of doing all the back and forth stuff. But it was what it was. And I eventually, the older I got, I became closer to my half brother. We continue to get closer now versus then because there's a 7-year age gap. So you don't really start relating to each other till you're kind of teetering into adulthood. So growing up, we were more like almost like distant cousins than half siblings or siblings. And then my mom eventually remarried when I was 7 years old. And he was an amazing, amazing guy. My stepdad, his name was Nelson, just such a goofball, ironically, so similar to my husband now. So many similarities, just like big kid, like men child, like a big man child, and just a great guy. And unfortunately, my stepdad, he passed away of liver cancer by the time I was age 12, and not from drinking. It was just like a freak thing. So, and all that kind of happened in the span of 9 months. So just to kind of, not that that's a huge part of the story, but I hate the term like daddy issues, but there was always like this sort of rotating door of like father figures, if that kind of helped put it into perspective a little bit. So, and my stepdad was kind of more of a father figure to me during that time frame from age 7 to 12 than my own dad was at the time. And my own dad recognized that, like wrote my stepdad like a nice letter thanking him for, helping raise me and all this stuff. So everything was amicable. It was a tragedy, but it was, everybody respected each other throughout it. And it was, it is what it is. And then fast forward like 25-ish years later, now like sort of in the recent decade, my dad and stepmom eventually divorced after a long marriage. However, they're still very close. And I've heard other people on the podcast kind of say, like, when we say dad, so when I say my dad, I'm referring to, my birth certificate father. So just, for me, it was never a question, even after this. I was like, my dad's still my dad, like that's not going to change anything. So anyway, so that kind of sets the stage, like growing up sort of kind of an only child with a half brother, but we're far apart in age, not super close with my dad, kind of wishing I was a little closer, but it just wasn't that way. And so now, as I said, I live in California, with, my daughter, and my husband. We're in the Bay Area. And, I'm kind of now going to teeter into like the discovery part now that we sort of have like a loose background, I guess. But I will say, so it was September of 2021, which is probably, Lily, when I started reaching out to you somewhere probably that fall, maybe late fall. So yeah, September of 2021, we're finally getting back there in the world. Like we're seeing people after the, major quarantine stint and all that stuff. So things seem like, they're looking up. You're just like, okay, the worst has already happened, right? Like this is crazy. Like our lives have completely changed. Blah, blah, blah. Right. And then, I remember I had a conversation with, my dad and my brother, my half brother. And I hadn't seen them for a while, obviously with the pandemic and everything. But even before that, it's just, I live on the other side of the country. So it's sometimes just hard for us to connect. So lo and behold, like when I had this conversation with them in September of 2021, they decided to book a trip to come visit me and, my family out here in California the following month. So we're talking September 2021. They're planning to come visit October 2021, like late October, I believe it was. And during this conversation, they actually booked the flights like together. They were coming out together. And sometimes they're not as close either with each other. So it was just really nice. I'm like, yay, like we're doing this. This is cool. Like, the three amigos, like this is going to be fun. Like, whatever. So no joke, the next day is kind of when this discovery came to light. And the reason that it came to light is because I'm staring at a picture of my daughter on the wall right now. I have a very energetic and vibrant, almost 8-year-old little girl. And ever since she was born, she's just been such high energy. And I was like, this kid has got to have ADHD, lo and behold, after many back and forth, pediatrician conversations and all that, by the time she was 6, which is right around when your doctor will finally call it like it is, if they suspect your child has some like behavioral thing going on. They usually don't like to do it prior to that age because they're still developing certain aspects of the brain anyhow. But by the age of 6, they were like, let's just call it like it is. Like she has ADHD, and lo and behold, like, we kind of figured out a routine for her that works. And I mean, she's great. She's thriving and everything. But what kind of triggered me with seeing her go through this is that I went through something similar growing up too. And I didn't really have like the hyperactivity in ADHD. I would consider myself more like ADD. And so anyways, like literally the day after I had this conversation with my dad and my brother and they booked the flight to come out, I was listening maybe to a different podcast or maybe it was a news article or what have you. And there was a substantial study that was done on a specific genetic marker that connects ADD, like anything ADD or ADHD in that realm, genetically hereditary. So there was some marker that gave like the actual gene. Of course, like this makes no sense to me, but in my brain, I'm like, oh, I wonder if that 23andMe test I took with my husband, 4 or 5 years ago at this point, shows anything on that. Like, I don't know. And this is how my brain operates. I'm always investigating something, even if it doesn't make any sense. I'm questioning everything. I'm thinking about that. I'm like, oh yeah, like my husband, we took this 23andMe thing. And at the time it was pretty silly. Like I got nothing out of it, which I will say, like, knock on wood, is probably a good thing. Like at that time, it was just like the big cancers that they're screening for, the BRCA gene, like all these other types of things, which great. I didn't have anything. My husband didn't have any huge red flags. Cool. Gave us some weird, goofy little things like, you're more likely to smell asparagus and urine. And I'm like, okay, this was not worth like the $96 sale that it cost to get this. But whatever, I'll take it for what it is, like, thank God nothing massive is wrong. And if I had the information, I would take it to a doctor. So we just kind of filed it away in the back of our heads and still had the app on our phone, or at least had like a reference to how to access the information in our email, something like that. So there's that. And then back in 2008, which I think is the year that somewhere in 2007 or 2009, 23andMe actually started. That's when it came out. And at that time, my dad and my stepmom were still married to each other. And my half brother, was younger then. And my stepmom, I still call her my stepmom, even though she's my ex stepmom, at the time was very into, being an advocate of your own health, which many of us are now, which is great. And she was kind of an early adopter of that. So when 23andMe came out, she was just thinking she's had, family history of cancers. So she, did the swab or whatever for herself, my dad, and my half brother back when it first started. And at that time, it was just, everything was so new, like it was just the big markers are what they screened for. There wasn't a whole lot of follow-up from that, really. So again, they filed that in the back of their minds too. And then, fast forward to this day, September 2021, and I'm looking on 23andMe like, oh yeah, I took this test. Let me check out this whole ADD connection or whatever it might be. Still don't know exactly what I was looking for, but I just was on a mission. And when I logged on, I had not logged into the app in about, I don't know, it had to be like at least 5 years. I just never had a reason to. And when I did, like the user interface had changed. A lot of the features had changed. So many new things had been added and different types of screenings and all this stuff. So I was kind of re-familiarizing myself with the platform. And then I noticed that, I don't know if they were trying to compete with like Ancestry, but they added a family tree component to 23andMe. They added a family tree component. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is kind of interesting. Like completely got sidetracked from why I even like logged back onto the app in the first place. Hit the family tree. And what it had done was it predicted, I guess, through their algorithm or, DNA percentage matching, it predicts and auto-populates your family tree. And they let you know, like, it's just a prediction, right? Like this certain percentages can get mixed up, like certain types of cousins can get mixed up with aunts and uncles. Like it just has to do with the percentages. So 23andMe just does their best to assume the actual role of that relationship. And if there's any question on that, it'll usually have like a little like information icon or something like denoting like, just so you know, it could be this, it could be that, but our guess is it's this, right? So anyways, I see my mom's, my maternal grandfather, so my mom's dad's side of the family. We have several people like early settlers in Maine, New England, East Coast, and I see all these names that I recognize. And I was like, holy cow, like this is kind of wild, like this is cool. And then I see like, I don't see anything from my maternal grandmother because she passed a long time ago and she was Belgian and there's just not a lot of, information there. And then I'm just seeing like, okay, there's really nothing on the other parent side. So at that time, it wasn't telling me, at least what I was seeing on screen that was auto-populated. It wasn't saying which parent was which, but naturally I could figure it out because the ones from Maine and New England are connected to my mom's side. So when I saw that my dad's side was empty, I was like, that's weird. Oh, well. And then I started thinking, I was like, wait a minute. And like my dad and my stepmom and my brother, they all took 23andMe like years ago when it first came out. So if they took it, I wonder if they should be popping in. But again, because I had not logged into the app in so many years, I assumed like maybe it was a thing you had to toggle on, right? Like a setting perhaps, or you have to give permission, or maybe because they took it when, that technology like first came out, maybe that's not even a part of this family tree. I had no idea, right? So I already have this text thread going between my dad and my brother because their trip that they literally just booked the day before. And I'm like, hey, you guys, I logged into 23andMe. Remember when you took like this test at this point, like 12 years ago or what have you? I'm like, I wonder now that they have this family tree feature, like if you log in, do you see me? And so my dad was just like, and again, I did mention my dad is 18 years older than my mom. So that puts my dad like he just turned 80 at this point. So he's not the guy that's on the computer who knows all his passwords, right? But of course, he's still close with his ex-wife, my former stepmom, my half brother's mother, and he's like, you know what? Contact her, and I'm not going to say names. Just I don't know what but he was like, just contact so and so. And she has all my information. I remember taking the test, but I have no idea like how that all works, And I was like, okay, like I guess I'll just reach out to her because she probably still has all of his information. And then, my brother ended up logging on and he was like, yeah, that's weird. I see dad and I see like some of dad's cousins connected. He's like, I don't see you. I wonder why. And I was like, oh, weird. And like, didn't think anything of it. And my dad completely like in one ear out the, like he directed me towards, my ex-stepmom. And then he completely like just forgot about me ever bringing it up, which is a blessing, I guess. And so when I connected with my stepmom, I think I was like a PI in a former life. I mean, she was definitely like an investigator as well. So the two of us like on the case, and then also simultaneously as I'm having this conversation with her, like, why isn't this showing up? Like, well, honey, your dad's cousin should be this last name and you don't see that on your end. That's weird because I see it on, his end. And at the same time, I just started feeling like just weird. I started feeling weird. I started feeling like, is this something that I should be talking about to her with? Like, does that just something felt amiss, if that makes sense? Like, I felt like, like if there is something going on here, like maybe it's not something I need to be discussing with my dad's, ex-wife. Like, I don't know what's happening here. But at that point, the floodgates were open. And it is what it is. And, my stepmom was like, I don't know what's going on, but why don't you contact 23andMe on your end? I'll contact them on my end and let's just see where we get like by the end of the week, whatever. And I was like, sure, like thinking it had to be some algorithmic error or some clerical error or something, bizarre. And that's when I discovered that 23andMe is completely ill-equipped to deal with these types of findings on the NPE side. So it was an experience going through the rigmarole with them because it's very impersonal. There's not a phone number that you can reach, at least that I could find, and I know how to sleuth, and I could not find an actual phone number to get a hold of a human, right? So they kind of put you through, the channels of, okay, well, you email this person, and then you get a canned response, right? And so I could tell that I was sort of in this canned email reply. Like I'm in design and marketing, so I sort of know like how these automated emails kick off and send and what that looks like and kind of the hints and clues to tell me that, okay, this is not a real person. And so I just kept replying back and I said, I think there's been a mistake. I would like to speak with somebody or at least chat with somebody on email who has like an actual like email address, like first name, last name, right? Like I need somebody that I can identify. And so that eventually happened. And I was still questioning the results because the results, the verbiage that they use to tell me, essentially what they tell you is that, like I had mentioned with like a second or third cousin maybe being misconstrued with an uncle or a great uncle or whatever, like sometimes those can happen at that deep of a level when we talk about genealogy. But when it comes to a parent, it's like pretty much like the odds of them screwing up like a parent are slim to none, put it that way. And I'm sure, you know that yourself, and I'm sure other people can corroborate. But of course, when you're going through it, you're like, I need more than that, right? I need more than just like the data points, the percentages, your canned email replies. Like I need something substantial. And they wouldn't talk to me. So it escalated to the next, I think it escalated to their supervisor, excuse me. And again, all just via email, nothing in person, no phone calls, nothing. And I think that way they can protect themselves because they have a paper trail of everything. And I understand that from a legal perspective, but on the other side of that, it's like we're humans and this is like life-shattering information. And for us just to assume at face value from some canned email response that this is indeed like what it comes down to. Like, it's just a really hard pill to swallow, So I finally got a more like personalized response from somebody. And by that, I just mean it sounded less like a robot wrote it, but it was still kind of like, I really truly believe that they have legal language that they have to stay within the bounds of, and they can't extend like sympathies or anything else like that. That's how I cope with it anyways. That's how I kind of moved past that. But at the end of the day, all they did was the final communication, an email chain with them, was a link to a blog post that said the title was Navigating New Relationships. And that's all that 23andMe gave to me at the end of the day. And I was just like, holy shit, like this. So like, A, I can't believe this is happening. B, I can't believe this is the way that they let it happen. And C, I mean, I couldn't even fathom that they don't give somebody some personalized, I don't know, like information about like, yes, we know this is effed up. Unfortunately, this is like a side effect that can occur of taking, a DNA test. And we get it. Like, we're sorry to rock your world, but you're just not going to get that, right? You're just not going to get that from them. And that's the point where you need to, I kind of learned to separate like, and with any NPE discovery, it's like you have like the stats, the data points, the DNA, the math, right? That all equals, like it is what it is. Like what the math equals out to is what it is. But then obviously what brings us all here is like, it's the emotional stuff, right? So I knew I have to deal with the emotional stuff on my own. Like, this is something I'm going to have to figure out. At that time, I hadn't discovered, your work or your podcast, Lily, or anything. Really, it took me 2 weeks, no joke, to even figure out the term NPE. It took me 2 weeks. I didn't even know what Google search terms to use when I was typing in to Google, like, my situation. The only thing I could think of was, dad is not my dad, like question mark. I don't even know. Like, does I need the question? I have no idea what's going on. Like Dr. Google is going to be like, yes, Josie, this is exactly what happened. Like, take a seat. I'll tell you everything. And it's just not like that. And simultaneously, then I get a text from my stepmom that says, Josie, please give me a call as soon as you can. And it was like a punch in the gut. I immediately knew that she's on the same discovery timeline as me, and I told her, I was like, not yet. I'm still figuring some stuff out. And so then I gave it a couple days, at which point I started just like going crazy. Like, that's where I kind of like went outside myself and was just really struggling, mentally and just emotionally with it all. Cause I still just wasn't sure yet. Right. I just wasn't sure like what was happening. And to go through something alone that's so personal and to not be sure what's happening is just like weird. And at that point, I was like, naturally, the next step here is to contact my mom, who incidentally actually lives by us now here. She moved out here from Michigan about 6 years ago to be by, my husband and my daughter and I to help, raise our daughter and be a part of that journey. So I hadn't, approached that aspect yet. But I talked to my stepmom and she was like, have you talked to your mom? And I was like, no, I haven't even talked to my mom yet. I mean, I will obviously, but it's like one step at a time. Like, I can only move so fast. And she's like, listen, like, I don't know what's going on. She's like, but well, let me back up. Before we even said that, I told her, I said, dad and my brother are coming up to visit in a few weeks. Like, let me just think about this longer. Please don't say anything. That's what I said. And then she agreed. She was like, I'm not going to say anything. But she's like, if your dad remembers that you asked about this and specifically asks for like a follow-up on what happened, she's like, I can't lie to him. And I was like, fair enough. Like, I don't expect you to lie to him. Like, we all want this to be like kumbaya as much as possible. And so it actually didn't get to that point. My dad never even, never even like remembered. So yeah, my dad, never brought it up. My stepmom's just kind of sitting there in the wings with me, like being supportive, like through text as much as she can. Oddly, it was a very strange thing because I felt closer to my ex stepmom then than I ever did in like the 25 years that she was married to my dad prior to that. It was just something odd. I'm like, maybe they had to be separated from each other for this to occur so that nobody would be so wrapped up in the storyline. Like we're all at this point in our lives like separate entities, kind of like, moved out of the house, divorced, like what have you. So it just kind of felt like if somebody's trying to help you, it's not, or give you advice, it's genuine. It's not because they're trying to save their family dynamic, right? So there was an aspect of that was just like, okay, I think I can do this, and yeah, I mean, so that's kind of how the whole thing was discovered. And I will say, like I had mentioned, I wasn't able to really find anything online at that point because I just wasn't sure how to even Google it, right? I mentioned that. And then what I ended up doing was I realized, and I've had some bouts with like depression and things like over the years. And I was like, this is bigger than me. This is a big deal. And my husband knew this was a really big deal. And so I went out and I found a therapist. And it took me a while to find a therapist. And, truth be told, I was actually looking earlier in the pandemic, as many of us were like stuck at home with our families, like trapped, I was trying to find like a third party, like someone to talk to. At that point about nothing specific, but now I had something specific. Now it was a trauma and it was like, like an emergency fire, like I needed to put out. So at that point I was just like, whoever's available, I will take. And I found someone right like 20 minutes away from me locally. We started off on Zoom and then moved, in office. And I will say I still see her now, like a year and 9 months later. It's serendipitous. Like she turned out to be amazing and she's never dealt with this before. Right. And maybe that's what I needed. Like, I don't know what I needed, I mean, we can always guess what would have been if XYZ were changed, but all I can think is that everything happened the way that it's supposed to, because that's just kind of what helps me cope, I guess. But she was great. She really did help me. And I'm glad that I sought her out so early in my journey, just because, I mean, my husband was not really equipped to deal with this type of a trauma. And nobody is. Like, I'm not. Like, this is not normal, right? Like, this is not normal. And incidentally, it's becoming more and more common. And it probably already was common for centuries, right? Like, this is a tale as old as time. But we don't know how to deal with it, right? It's not normal. Just because it's common, it's not normal. And what's happening, and through my journey and my story, is that I've discovered it is becoming more normal and we need to normalize it. We need, the girl that just discovered like her life is upended by this thing that she's, become privy to. Like, how is she going to search for what she needs on the internet? Like, what we need to arm people with this information. And I mean, ultimately, like, my hope is that because so many of us find out through DNA tests, I don't really think that they should assume the responsibility, right? Because it's not their responsibility, but there is some karma involved there. And I think that there are other ways to direct people. Like, there needs to be like a specific department. I don't know if that would be under the mental health umbrella or whatever you want to coin it as or phrase it as, but there needs to be something more personal, because I shouldn't have had to search blindly for 2 weeks just to figure out what the hell an NPE is or what it stands for. But I will tell you, once I did discover that term and kind of my vocabulary in this arena started to expand, that's when I started finding, the podcasts, the other groups, the Facebook groups, things of that nature. And I will say in my own journey, I've always kind of tiptoed in and out of those resources because I tend to get like overwhelmed. Like, if all I listen to are like sad stories, like I need to remove myself from it. And then there's certain days, if I have a bad day, like, yeah, I do need to go and I need to give back to the people who are going through what I went through, or I do need to share my story with random strangers because ironically they're the only people that get it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's a time and place for all of that. So I will say, like, I haven't dove, head first into all these resources, but I definitely use them when I need to and as I need to, and they are helpful in that way. So back to the story. So, I discover all this. And ironically, like, so as my dad and my brother are preparing for their trip out here, because my dad at this point has been divorced for, a few years coming up to this point. He's lived in Michigan his whole life. He's done with winter, winter in Michigan. So he decides like, hey, he's still got some buddies in Florida. He's going to start, snowbirding in Florida over the winter months. And then that eventually led to him reconnecting with like some old, like college buddies that he's known for like 55 years, and my dad is an only child and he has just compensated for that by having so many friends. And I mean, this is a, man in his early 80s who does not go on Facebook or social media, and he still just makes such an effort to stay in touch with these people. And I've always admired that about him. Like, he has no shortage of community, right, around him, and he's facilitated that on his own. So when he told me, like, I think I'm going to sell my place in Michigan and I'm going to move to Florida, full time, or at least we'll start out 6 months a year and then we'll get to full time. And I was like, Dad, go for it. Like, that's really cool. At this point, every once in a while when he was in Florida, he would be sending me pictures like, oh, here's my old college buddy, so-and-so, at a car show, blah, 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 in Florida. He's like, oh, do you remember meeting them? You met them when you were like 6 months old. And I'm like, no, Dad, like, I don't remember meeting your old college buddy when I was 6 months old, And so it was just funny. When he started going to Florida, I started getting all these random texts from my dad with like pictures of him and these old men, and I'm like, okay, cool, Dad, you do you, So, and that will kind of circle back. There's a reason why I said that naturally. I'll kind of back up. So while we're still in the preparation phase of my dad and my brother getting ready to come visit, there's those few weeks in between the finding and their actual visit. I have a hard conversation with my mom. And my mother, that's a story for another day, but my mom is like, she's like a cross between Lucille Ball and like Goldie Hawn. Like, she's just, put it this way, like, she's beautiful. She relied on her looks a lot when she was younger. And as she's aged, she's still gorgeous, but we all age. Like, that's a thing. And she's kind of lost her identity a little bit now that those youthful looks are kind of gone. So it's, she's kind of been on the struggle bus for a while now, like mentally. She's moved out here to California with us, hasn't met a lot of people. We're kind of like her only tribe out here, like, she doesn't really have any friends. And so when I start questioning her about this, like, she has nobody else to talk to. Like, there's nothing, right? She has no community out here. And she chose not to even talk to her own friends, that still live back in the Midwest and all that. And finally, my mom was kind of avoiding me. When I brought it up initially, I said, look, this is what I found out. And then I got the whole thing like, oh, you don't believe those DNA things. They're just, it's a load of crap. And I was like, okay, like, of course you would say that, right? Like, okay, I get it. Like, the defense mechanism is kicking in. Like, here we go, buckle up. This is going to be a bumpy ride. And so, long story short, I will say, like, just growing up with my mom as pseudo, the only child of a single mom, my mom was just a party girl. She went out and she had fun a lot. And I mean, growing up, she was a fabulous mother. Like, she's still, I don't discount any of the qualities that she had, like raising me or taking care of me or, any of that. She was amazing and probably even above and beyond. But, there's always times where she would just go out with a friend and like overdo it and come home and just not, really recollect the whole timeline of the past events, right? Didn't happen all the time, but it happened enough for there to be a pattern, a noticeable pattern over years, over decades, right? So there's that. So then, finally I have this conversation with my mom, and she's, avoiding me initially, discounting everything, like, I'm your mom, your dad's your dad, your brother's your brother. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, I don't need to deal with this. And it was just, her reaction was weird. And my husband was like, like, what, how weird, like, what a weird reaction, And I was like, it is odd. It is odd. And so finally I told her one day, she had picked up my daughter from after school, and spent some time with her and was dropping her off. And I was like, just drop her off in the driveway. I'm like, I need to just run out and talk to you really quick. And I told her, and I'm like, you need to talk to me or you're not going to be able to see, your granddaughter anymore. Like, something's happening. And she was just kind of like, let me get some stuff in order. She's like, I need to find a therapist. And I was like, what on earth is going on? So I'm like, of course, there's a few days that pass in between that initial driveway conversation and the actual true conversation that we had, the heart to heart where she came over. And in those few days, like, I'm just losing my mind. I'm just going crazy. I'm becoming paranoid. That's a whole story in and of itself, like how we get inside of our own heads. She saw a therapist, found a good therapist for her at the time. And unfortunately, due to health insurance hiccups, she wasn't able to stick with her, but it did help her through, the heightened moments of this trauma. And there was a story that occurred that when she initially heard from me, she thought this was all just like a misunderstanding. This is how her side of the story goes anyways. Do we believe it? I don't know. Because I try to give everybody the benefit of the doubt, but at the same time, there's just only so many benefits that you can give out before there's like the doubt overshadows that. She comes over to my house after getting the guts through talking to this therapist to come over and talk to me. And she's telling me the story about how, her marriage to my dad was on the rocks. My dad had a wandering eye, and this is a known fact. And he's actually been married 3 times. And that was a situation in most of his, marriages. He's a good looking guy, looked way younger than he always was, and just always had a wandering eye. And my mom put up with it for a couple years. But then at the point, give or take like the 2 years, like around when I was conceived, they were kind of on again, off again, even though they were still legally married. And at this point, they had moved from Miami to Ohio, like I had mentioned earlier. And that's allegedly where I was conceived. And upon this story coming to light, and my mom did some, like soul searching, as she puts it, or just digging deep through like memories and things. And to this day, she says she still doesn't remember exactly what happened, but she said there's only one time in her short, few year marriage to my dad that she was separated from my dad. And that was one weekend in, this would have been 1981 because I was born in 1982. There was one weekend when she left Ohio and flew to Miami for an interview to become a flight attendant for Pan Am Airlines, like an old airline that's not around anymore, right? And she said at that point, my dad was kind of in and out of the marriage, which I knew. And my dad, like that was not a secret. Like we knew, everybody knew that they were having issues. But the prospect of my mom possibly getting a flight attendant job and having perks for flying, she thinks kind of lured my dad like back in. I mean, we're talking, I guess you could say that's kind of shallow, but it is what it is. So anyways, so she goes back to Miami where she used to live with my dad, and stays with a girlfriend of hers. And of course, like I had mentioned earlier, Miami in the 80s, she goes out on a boat and she's partying, and she's partying with this guy, and as she's telling me the story, I'm like, just give me the name, Mom. Like, what's the name? Give me the name. And so she gives me the name, which I'm not going to say. But, and she's like, I could be completely grabbing at straws here, but she's like, I know that I was on a boat with my friend so-and-so. And then Josie, I think that your dad's friend so-and-so was also with us. She's like, I partied. She's like, you got to remember, this is Miami. Da, da. I'm like, okay, I get it. She's like, we had a wild night partying. We thought that I got this job. Like, it was so much fun. You know, I don't remember. She's like, I don't remember. She's like, I don't even know if this story is even what happened. She's like, but if I recall back, you know, at this point, she's thinking back 40 years or 39 years ago. She's like, if I think back, that's the only time that I was not with your dad. That's the only weekend, literally. And so she gives me the name. And wouldn't you know, all those old photos that my dad's sending me and texting with his buddies in Florida, going to car shows and reconnecting with all these old men who I met when I was a baby, but I don't remember. Well, lo and behold, one of them is one of his oldest friends. And that's the name that my mom tosses out my way.
Wow.
So when I mentioned that my dad was leaving Michigan to move to Florida, he bought a place right down the street from this friend, because that's the friend that he reconnected with and decided that he wants to spend like his twilight years around, right? So my mom tells me this name and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I'm like, you know that my dad literally is closing on a house, a condo that he bought right near him. Like, they're buddies. They see each other all the time. Like, they've been best friends, but living in different states, they've kind of been in and out of each other's lives, you know? And they've totally reconnected, like besties, pretty much. So there's that. And then the irony as well is that my dad is supposed to be closing on the condo the weekend that he's in California visiting us. Because he was like, just so you know, I'm probably going to be on and off the phone because I'm closing on this house. So I was like, that's fine. So I'm just like, this is so effed up. You know, I'm like, this is insane. This doesn't make any sense. So I take the name that my mom gives me. And of course, I go back in my iMessages on my iPhone and I'm like looking at all these pictures.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, these old men, like they're old men. They don't look like how they looked when they were younger. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't really tell. And I'm just like, this is crazy. And of course I kind of have like a demeanor and like a little bit of humor about it now, because that's also like my coping mechanism. But at that point, like, you know, a year, 8 months ago or whatever, it was, I mean, trauma with a capital T. Like, I couldn't, it was like being this in this, like the lead character in your own movie. Like, it didn't seem real. So much so to the point that things were happening so rapidly. Like I said, like the majority of the story happened in the span of 6 weeks. I started like recording videos to myself on my phone in like a hidden album, because I think it's the ADD in me, but like I knew that I was going to forget. Like, this timeline was moving so fast and there were so many details. I knew I was going to like forget parts of the plot, and that I needed all this information if I was going to like solve the case, quote unquote, you know? So I started kind of recording these videos. And oddly enough, that was sort of helpful for me. It was, if you think about like when you used to watch like reality TV or like their confessionals, when they sit in the confessionals and like talk to the camera, it's kind of like that. Like, in a weird way, it's like having therapy with yourself. I don't know. It could just be me, but in an odd way, it was helpful. I still have those videos. I have no idea if I'm ever going to do anything with them or what, but it does help me channel the emotion that I was going through. And in a way, it's like the fact that I can sit here with you today and not be as emotional and actually like make jokes about it as I was emotional in those videos, like, is amazing. Like, so I feel like it kind of comes full circle where you're like, if you come out the other side, you're like, I'm that much stronger for it, you know? So it's interesting to see yourself in that state back then. So it is like a little time capsule, I suppose. But that's kind of a side note. So I take the information that's happening, and I was like, of course I go online, and I don't know how I did it. Like, I signed up. It's interesting. Like, when there's a will, there's a way. Like, in school, I was like procrastinator, like turning in like the book reports the last minute, you know, all that kind of stuff. But when it came to this, somehow like my mind, like I knew exactly what to do. Like, I went online. I went into all like, you know, birth records, death records, divorce records. What is it? Like census reports from the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s. I took the last name of the friend that my mom had, given me and my dad's friend, and I started running with that name. And I was like looking back, and I had found, the amount of sleuthing that I did, I was like, somebody must have been helping me, like at some point. Like there's no way it's like striking lightning. Like I couldn't do it twice if I tried. Like I don't even know how I did it. And I even found, I don't know if it was through a different podcast or like a random YouTube video, somebody had thrown out a name of a genealogist that helps people with these types of situations. And I was like, you know what? If I'm working doing my own thing and I have her doing this too, like maybe we can confirm what seems like could likely be happening, right? And lo and behold, I found somebody, and she was so sure that she could figure this out. She did it pro bono. However, I ended up figuring it all out before her. So I was looking up this last name online, like I mentioned, with all these census reports and everything, and it led me to a paternal grandmother, a grandmother's name. It's so funny, like even thinking about it now, I can't even like recreate in my mind like what happened. Like retrace the steps. I do have an actual like physical map that I printed out, like taping, like letterhead paper together, that I like did like this whole like map with like lines and circles and names and a timeline and all this crazy stuff. But long story short, I ended up on this name, like an old lady, right? And I'm like, who is she? Like, what's the connection? And then I was like, okay, I'm just going to let this sit here, and I'm going to just remember that she's connected to somebody in the past that somehow links up the tree back down to me, right? But who knows? So simultaneously, I do the simplest thing in the world. I get on Facebook and I just look up the last name, and a girl pops up. And as soon as I saw her name, I remember kind of my dad talking about, oh, his buddy has this daughter, so-and-so, and he had some stories about this daughter. And I remember at the time being like, oh, that old guy from the photo, like, I don't care. I don't even know this person, like, I don't care about his daughter. Like, okay, thanks, Dad, for the information. And then I find her name and I see her, and just like me, she has big, bright green eyes. And there was just as soon as I saw her photo, like I tear up, like even just like thinking about it, because I just felt connected to her. I was just like, this is weird. Like I never see anybody with my eyes. Like I have very, very large, like, like animated eyes that are bright green. And it's just rare that you see that. And when I saw her picture, I was like, God, this is so weird, And she was a makeup artist in Las Vegas, so doesn't really live near me, but is in the same time zone, And I'm just like, okay, I'm letting this sit on this side. I'm letting that other random grandmother's name or whatever it was sit on the other side, right? Several generations apart from each other. And then just something came over me. I FaceTimed with 3 of my best friends who were in the loop with me on all this. Because I told them, I'm like, I'm going to be that weirdo that's like giving you way too much information than you need to hear, but it's my way of like processing what's going on. And I need like a sounding board before I make these crazy decisions, right? So I showed them the picture and they were like, oh my God, like that's Josie, that's weird, And I was like, I think I'm going to reach out to her. And they were like, okay, but just like, what are you going to say? So I Facebook messaged her, and I don't know like if you or how many people listening know, like sometimes when somebody that you don't know DMs you or, private messages you on Facebook, it can go into a random folder that you sometimes just never see. I don't know what that's called or why it's like that, but because they're not connected to you yet, like through your friends or what have you, it doesn't like natively pop up in your inbox when you go to your Facebook messages. So I reached out to her kind of knowing that was probably going to be the case. And I told her, I just said, I kind of played it coy. I was like, listen, I'm into genealogy. I'm putting together a family tree, and it looks like we have, some connection at this name over here, right? That grandmother name, like what have you. I'm like, by chance is your dad so-and-so? I'm like, if so, like, if you're cool with it, like, would you want to have a chat? Like, I'm just trying to fill in this family tree. And then I wrote, of course I completely understand if I sound like a psychopath and you're like, who is this crazy chick? Like, ignore forever. Like, I totally get it. It's up to you. Lo and behold, the message comes through. She gets it. And even to this day, she's like, I don't know why I saw that message, because I never see anybody's message, that's not directly in my friend group or related to a friend. I was like, I don't know, that's crazy. So she writes back and she's like, yeah, that's my dad. She's like, what do you want to talk about? What's going on? And I was like, do you care if we talk on the phone? I'm like, again, if I seem like a psycho, I don't even feel the need to respond to me. Like, I completely get it. This is totally left field. And she was like, no, totally, I'll call you. And so I was like, oh my God. So she calls me and just genuinely sounds like the sweetest, nicest person, just like almost like a spiritually open person, just like open to whatever, right? Like, does not sound judgmental, does not come off accusational, just seems like a person who's just waiting to see if you need information from them. That was it. And so I'm telling her the story that I just gave you, the coy version. And I was like, yeah, so I saw, like, is your grandmother so-and-so? Because I think we're connected and da da da. And as I'm talking, all of a sudden, and at this point, I think I'm being sly. I didn't think I gave anything away, but maybe it was like, maybe my voice was shaky or I just seemed kind of nervous. But out of nowhere, she just goes, she's like, I feel like you right now are trying to tell me that you think my dad is your dad. And I was like, oh, shit. I'm like, okay. I'm like, why is that? And she's like, I don't know, but I've always wanted a sister. And I was just like, I started tearing up and I was just like, oh my God, like, this is crazy. And it was just nuts. And ever since then, she has been like just an amazing, co-pilot in this journey, really. She literally, in her words, she has been as willing and open to help as much as she is to fade into the background if I need her to. If I decide that this isn't a relationship that I want to pursue, if I've changed my mind about something, or whatever it may be, I don't owe her an explanation. She will just kind of fall off the radar if that's what I decide is the right way forward. And I never decided that. And so we kept talking and I told her the story and she was like, do you want me to take a test? And I was like, I mean, if you want to. I was like, I'll pay for it. I didn't know like what to do. I'm like, what's the right protocol here? Like, this is uncharted territory. And so long, she ends up taking a test, but it was, of course, as we all know, like, it takes a few weeks, right, for the results to come in. No joke. My dad and my half brother are literally on their plane landing at SFO. And right before they touch down on their visit to come see me, I get a text from my newly discovered half sister that confirms that we are half siblings and we share 27% DNA. And I was just like, oh my God. I'm like, at that point, I was already like 85% sure, but I just couldn't be completely sure without her, going through with the test and everything, which she did. And I was just like, oh my God. And at that point, like, my dad was landing, right? So, and I told my husband, I'm like, I don't know what to do here. Like, I feel like I need to tell my dad what I know, but I don't think it's my story or my place to tell him who. My dad ends up coming to visit. He wants to go for a run. I decide to walk him around the neighborhood to give him pointers as to where to go. And then I decided, you know what, let's ditch the run. Let's go for a walk. And I told him everything. And he was like, oh my God. He's like, well, first of all, this changes nothing. He's like, you're my daughter. That changes nothing. He's like, I accept my responsibility in this. I was not the best to your mother. He's like, I am surprised, but I played a role in this as well, which I was very surprised to hear him say. And then he even started guessing. He's like, which, is it somebody I know? Is it so-and-so? And then all of a sudden he goes, is it name? Like, he gives the name. And I was like, Dad, why would you say that? And he's like, I don't know. I just feel like, so-and-so name, has just had such a rough life. Like, he lost his son when he was, very young. And, then he recently lost his wife. I just feel like if he can see how amazing you are as much as I see how amazing you are, like, maybe this could be a good thing for everybody. And I was like, oh my God, like, this is insane. And so after our walk, we came back and my dad texted his buddy, and even my mom, and was like, Josie's given me the news bulletin. And, as of right now, like, it's a lot, but I think we can all move forward. And I was like, wow, that's so evolved of you. But unfortunately, that's not where the story ended. After about 5 months, my dad realized, the more he sat on it, he just thought, you don't break the bro code like that. Even though we're old men now, like, we weren't when it happened, and he knew. And, he knew, and he kept that in. So unfortunately, they are not, friends anymore, yet they still live right by each other, in Florida. And I actually just went to visit my dad, and I met my biological father. And I actually met my half sister around Christmas time, because she happens to be dating a guy who's from a city that's 15 minutes away from me here in California. So she was here meeting his family. So it's all these things. There's just so many coincidences. And so I did meet, my biological father, and it was very difficult. I ended up having a panic attack when I was leaving, not because it went badly, but just because it's a lot. And just when you think the story ends, there's always more to it. But it ended well. It was a good meeting. It was a difficult meeting, but it ended well. And all in all, I am a lot closer to my dad now, which is just kind of ironic. My relationship with my mom is sort of strained, but we're working on it. That is in progress, right? So there's definitely still some open loops still, but
Yeah.
I would say there's more closed loops now. And now I stay in touch with my half sister. It was awesome meeting her. We looked so much alike. It's crazy, even though I actually look more like my mom, which is weird, but there's something about having similar eyes to somebody that makes you look more like them than like the facial features. So yeah, that in a nutshell is pretty much the story. I hope that someday my dad and his friend, can be on talking terms again. My dad has since sold the townhome and bought a home in 30 miles away in Florida. But I respect his decision, and it has nothing to do with me, is what he's saying. There were other things. This was just kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back, unfortunately. And the fact that I can just sit here and talk about it is pretty epic, because I don't think I would have been able to do this. And I just thank God for like therapy. That was so helpful, and just finding a community of people, even though I didn't find them as early as I wanted to. But just knowing that you're not alone. And this will start happening to more and more people. So I think we need to know how to handle it, and how to handle it if it happens to friends. It's not just happening to us, like it happens to the people around us too.
And like you said, it is so hard before you know what that word NPE is. What is this? What are we? What is this thing we're going through? How do you even Google it? Yes, I've heard people say, my dad is not my dad, like putting in those Google search terms, because you're looking for something for this when you find this out, so you don't feel so alone.
Absolutely.
And thank you so much for sharing, because what you're doing here is you're giving to the archive here that we have, our collection of stories of NPEs. And I think people are nodding along. That's what I'm always hearing. And so nice to hear someone going through the same thing, even with its painful moments.
Yeah.
Just to know you're not alone. Josie, if people wanted to reach out to you directly, could they do that?
Yes, they can. I think the best way would probably be it's actually my work email. I'm a graphic designer, and I'll spell it for you as well, but it's hello@Spade and Anchor. That's Spade as in like the car, the suit, and Andy, anchor as in anchoronaboat.com.
All right, I will put that email address below. Thank you for being willing to let people reach out to you. I know a lot of times we get a handful of emails with questions, and of course, we're only looking for supportive comments.
Yeah,
But thank you so much, Josie, for coming on. I really appreciate it. And thank you for sharing your story.
absolutely. I hope it helps somebody else too. So thank you for what you're doing.
These stories are here for us to identify with. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, email npestories@gmail.com. You do not have to give any identifying information. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, I'd like to hear from you. Subscribe to this podcast to hear more. Come heal with us.